On this podcast, you'll find interviews with high-performing, successful individuals in life sciences. On a weekly basis, we cover their proven methods, principles, strategies, and mindsets to implement new technologies that scale to meet the needs of people in our world.
Welcome to the latest episode of the Life Science Success Podcast. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don Davis, and I'm a consultant in the life science space, and I help companies scale and manage complexity and increase performance. Today, I'm going to be joined by Mark Gordon. Welcome, Mark.
Hi, Don. How are you?
Really good. And thanks a lot for being here. I appreciate it. And I look forward to having a great conversation with you about the drug development process and ways that companies can continue to, to leverage your technology and capability. So thanks.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah. So before we get started, and we talk about you and your company, one of the things I wanted to talk about a little bit was the drug development, process itself. So how does the drug development work its way through, from the very start of the process all the way through to the end, and kind of those percentages. And as I have it, in phase 1 clinical trials, about 75% of the drugs make it through phase 1 clinical trials. In phase 2 clinical trials, about 50% of the drugs make it through. And then in phase 3, 59%, and then 88%, make it through kind of that NDA or BLA portion of the drug discovery process. And so, it means that the likelihood of success, according to my calculations, is actually, less than 20% or something like that. So Is that kind of match what you know as well?
You see lots of statistics. The largest publications we've seen, which have analyzed thousands and thousands of drug programs as they go through clinical trials, really put the number at more like 10%. Only, and sometimes you see even less. 10% of any drug that starts clinical trials, 10% of all of the drugs that start clinical trials get all the way through approval. So it's pretty abysmal, pretty rough.
Yeah, I would say so. And so maybe as a next introduction, could you talk to us a little bit about, you're the CEO of Diviner, and can you tell us about what Diviner does and essentially what does the technology look to do?
So Diviner is focused squarely on that problem, which is there's got to be a better way, or there's got to be a way to improve that success rate. So if you could arm investors in drug development, and investors in drug development are pharma companies, of course. Big pharma is a huge part of that ecosystem. Biotech venture capitalists. When things get further on the line, and we're talking about publicly traded biotechs, which, as you know, they IPO early in clinical trials or even before. That's public equities funds, hedge funds. So they're all investors. And if you could arm investors with a way to better pick the winners, improve that probability of success, they would do far better. They'd have better returns, and we'd get better medicines. So that's what Diviner is about solving that problem.
Yeah. So, in terms of the overall perspective of new clients that come to Diviner, what do they look like? What are they looking for, and how does the platform work?
So it's interesting. It's an interesting question. We are pre-revenue, so we're beginning to, after a lot of proof of concept work, we're beginning to go to the market and talk to potential clients. What the problems that we're solving are, essentially, is this drug going to work? Should I invest in it? And we had a hypothesis when we started Diviner that collective human intelligence is the solution to the problem, backed and supported by AI and analytics, but mainly human-centered. And there are really good reasons for that, which I can get into. But to answer your question first, we had a hypothesis that we had a method that would be better at predicting which drugs were going to work. And we knew that it would be very difficult to get the attention of serious investors in the industry, the pharma companies, the VCs, et cetera, until we had proven that our math worked, that our statistics worked, that we could take a drug and give it a probability of success and say this drug is 70% chance likely to work, or 30%, that we had something to build on. So we're pre-revenue, we've invested the money we've raised, and we've done a lot of bootstrapping, and we've run a very large proof of concept to show that we can, in fact, predict which drugs will work. Now, what do we do with that? To really think it would be, to your question, biotech funds that invest in biotechs would, if they believed that we can help them tell which ones are going to work, they'll pay for those insights, either in the form of a subscription to our forecasts. In some cases, can you forecast something we're looking at, Diviner, that you haven't looked at? So it would be a sort of a custom or a bespoke offering. And our assumption really out of the gate was, after talking to a lot of people in the industry as we were starting to build the capability, that the signals that we're generating are the signal that is the hardest to assess in assessing a biotech company. You look at the management team, you look at the science, but is the drug going to work? That's the big unknown. And if we have a signal that is predictive, then the best way to monetize it, at least the best way to prove to the industry there's something real there, is going to be to power investment funds directly with these signals. So we're looking at some creative ways to monetize, but essentially it is, should I invest in this company? Should I make a venture investment? Should I buy the stock if it's publicly traded? What are the odds the drug's going to work? That's essentially the question.
It's funny that you say that, because so last night I was listening to the Chris Ye podcast. Chris Ye is a co-author of Blitzscaling. And with Blitzscaling, they came up with 7 factors that essentially, point to whether or not if an organization is ready to be blitzscaled or not. So essentially what they do is they look at a series of, or a portfolio of companies, and then in this podcast they kind of rank whether or not they should suggest to these companies that, hey, look, you're actually a good target for blitzscaling or not. And I think it's an amazing sort of thought process that you can use this collective intelligence, but also sort of historical thinking to kind of say, hey, look, let's influence the way that this process might play out in the future, and use some of our historical capability to really help companies decide whether or which companies should actually receive additional funding in the future.
Right. I mean, the technique you mentioned is, I think, similar in a lot of ways to how you'd rate any complex topic. Maybe how an investor would assess a startup company, or how you decide whether an M&A makes sense. What are the factors to consider, and let's score them on a number of scales. When it comes to drug development, those things, that you can define some things that you want to assess, and that's of course what the industry does today. But then there's that big unknown thing, which is, what's the probability the drug's actually going to work or show efficacy and safety in this trial? So
right.
There's that big unknown factor that we're focused on, knowing that anybody that's a serious investor in the industry will absolutely score the management team, score the many other attributes about the decision.
Yeah, and so I mean, in terms of the way that it's going for you with regards to investment, where are you guys currently at right now from an investment standpoint?
So we raised some friends and family money, and then some early angel money about a year ago, and that was enough to carry us through this proof of concept that we ran all last year. Essentially, what we did is we recruited a network of industry veterans, people that have spent their careers in drug development, and we brought their expertise together into our proprietary process. And we ran a process. Every week, we assessed a new clinical trial and gave it a probability, and then waited for the results to measure how good we were. We didn't wait. We just kept doing more. And so we did that last year with that initial funding. We've now, based on the success we've had, the track record is better than we had hoped for initially. We've been able to put a round together that we're getting close to closing that will take us now through another major set of proof points, going to market with paying customers. And another one is demonstrating that our predictive signals are strong enough to make trades on in the public equities market. That's another proof point that we believe will give us not only one powerful way to monetize what we're doing, but also an additional proof point. So a little bit of money last year, and now a more substantial second part of our seed funding for right now.
And so in terms of next steps after that, where do you see things, kind of progressing from there? What would happen next?
So there's a couple of major themes or sets of milestones. One is about continuing to improve and to scale. So, our win-loss, our track record initially after 21 results to score ourselves on is we're very happy with it, but we know that our predictive power is still fairly nascent compared to where we believe it can be as we continue to improve our predictive capabilities. So it's about scaling and improving that, which is recruiting more industry veterans into our network of diviners, we call them. And by the way, our diviners have an average of 22 years of experience in the industry, heavy PhD, MD, heavy R&D focus. And they tell us they love and they get to collaborate with people that are peers without any of the usual corporate agendas or politics or biases. So they love the process. So it's about scaling that network more. And then it'll be really important to add in analytics and various forms of AI to improve our predictive power. That's on building and improving the engine. And then going to market and making sure that we can meet customer needs with our solution in the ways they want to see them. Finding our initial customers, we're in conversations now. And so we look out, a year, and the goal will to have been stronger prediction power, more scale, more forecasts, and customers. Beyond that, there are other use cases where we're focused on pretty narrowly right now, mid-stage clinical trial results. But where it gets really exciting is assessing early stage science, assessing preclinical candidates, for example. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So for anybody that's watching, it looks to me like the video's pausing occasionally, but Mark, your audio's coming straight through. So I'm not exactly sure what's happening with the internet today, but it seems like there is a little bit of a technical glitch as well. But it seems like your audio's coming through just fine. And so I would say we continue. And so the next question I have to tee up with you is, so in your career, you spent a lot of time focusing in on pharma intelligence, based on my sort of judgment of looking at, your past. How much did that experience shape, what you're doing right now with Diviner?
Yeah, it had a pretty big impact on it, as you might guess. My background is in computer science. So I spent the first part of my career doing software development and then a little bit of software sales. I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur, and I got a lot of advice that said, you better learn how to sell. So I did a little bit of that. I found myself at Eli Lilly and Company in 1999, when Prozac was a couple of years from going off patent, which is always a big corporate scramble in a pharma company when there's that patent cliff coming. Right. And it was an exciting time to be there. I was in a drug scouting team, a biotech scouting team, and my first exposure to pharma. I couldn't spell mechanism of action. And brilliant scientists and business people together in rooms assessing science. And they all knew that most of the drugs would fail after they licensed them because most drugs failed. That was shocking to me. So I spent a couple of years doing that, a couple of years then in inside a business development team at Roche, similar kind of world, looking for the next assets to fill their pipeline. And then you asked about pharma intelligence. I spent 7 years at a Thomson Reuters business unit focused on life sciences, and then 5 years in an Informa business unit focused on pharma and life sciences. And in both of those cases, the jobs were product strategy and direction. Where do we take our products? And the products were databases of all of the drugs that are in development by the industry, the clinical trials that are being run. And so I learned, a lot more about how pharma companies and biotech companies look at drug development decisions and what are the data points they consider. A lot about the success rates, the high failure rates in the industry. There were a lot of analyses that I came across. And the other thing so it got me thinking, over many years about more and more about this problem that became the one that we're focused on with Diviner. The other thing is, in product strategy or product management, the objective is make sure you understand the market needs clearly before you build a product. In those companies, it was about building a next generation of products because they had them, or new add-on products. And you never build a product until you fully understand what the market wants and is willing to pay for. And, I learned the hard way. We had some failures that I could take responsibility for, and we had some successes. And I learned, about, what works. And in the second job in Informa, it was at a more senior level and leading product teams and getting involved in M&A, acquiring other data companies, and helping turn a business around. So I learned tons. But back to the bit about making sure you understand the market needs, along comes this idea in my head that I think there's a way to solve this failure rate problem. Mm. And what we're doing with Diviner is we're kind of, in a way, we're saying we've got a solution that the industry doesn't even believe can exist. Nobody's been able to figure out how to predict with any probability that's reliable which drugs are going to work. So there's not a budget for that.
Right.
But it's such a strong signal. And that's why we've chosen, we're going to choose the first way to monetize will be in directly areas where you can trade biotech stocks based on the results, because their proof points are right there. And we know that once the proof points are accepted, then the willingness to pay will be there, because we know we're solving a problem. So it's a bit of a long answer, but it's learning over the years about, market research and when and how to assess market needs and willingness to pay, and then turning it a little bit on its head in the kind of in a startup which is solving a tough problem first, knowing that once the industry recognizes the value, the willingness to pay will be there. So,
yeah, I remember I would think at the end of the day, drug companies would also be interested in this as well. I remember, this is decades ago, but I was at GE Healthcare, and we had shrunk MRI implementation cycle time while I was there. And, we had one of the big 10 pharma come in and look at exactly what we had done. How did we step through this process and find a better way to solve the problem? Because they wanted to know, how did they get to market faster than everybody else? That was the key question that they were asking. And, at the time I could provide them less information about that, but I do think that, a solution like yours, if you could help them down select faster, help them sort of focus on the key things that will be successful, that would be helpful as well. Also, just wanted to mention really quickly before I turn it back to you, Mark, is Clayton Millis came up and said our audio sounds great. So we sound fine, but I do think the video's pausing kind of here and there. At least that's what I can see from my side.
Okay. Well, I never looked great anyway, as long as I sound okay.
Right. That's why this used to be an audio podcast, because I used to tell people nobody wants to see me anyway. That's exactly it. All right. So tell me this, and you kind of mentioned this along the way. Why can't artificial intelligence entirely solve this problem? You're talking about having, experts, that are involved in your solution as well. And so why couldn't you turn this entirely over to artificial intelligence and have it, kick out an answer?
Yeah, I love that question. I can really geek out on the answer, but I'll try to not go to, and I'm not an AI expert, but so here's the way I mean, the shorter answer is the data sets are too small and it would be machine learning would be the ideal solution to this problem. If in machine learning for predictive purposes, the idea is, AI machine learning, you turn it loose on a bunch of data and you figure out what are the combination of signals which are most predictive of success. So you turn machine learning algorithms loose, or you just, create the right algorithms. You say, here are all the prior clinical trials that have happened, and here are the ones that are successful. What combinations of attributes, dosage, enrollment criteria, the track record of the sponsor, whatever those might be, what combination of attributes are most predictive of success? And that's how machine learning would work on a problem like this. In fact, I've had some experience collaborating with an AI ML group that did just that. The problem is the data sets are too small in this case, and they're changing all the time. So if you think about, I love the machine learning example I love to use is, say Google's image recognition, right? You can type in cat eating a hot dog and find pictures of cat eating. Did software figure that out? Well, no, they took millions of images that were tagged as what they were by humans, or they probably didn't have to take millions, right? They took thousands, and then they train algorithms on millions of examples until the algorithms get good enough to figure it out. There are millions of pictures out there, and cats eating hot dogs always look the same, or they're different, right?
Right.
There's not a changing, right? But drug development, there are, I don't know, 40, 50 more lately, 60 drugs approved every year. How many drugs are in clinical trials at any
Somewhere
one time?
between 50 and 60 is the success rate, I think, annually
Yeah.
now, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So there are thousands, and over 30 years, maybe, 100,000, there are 300,000 trials in Trial Trove, I think, in that database. So there's just not enough data for machine learning to be effective, and it's all changing. The way trials are running is changing. Even before COVID, it was changing, the way they're being designed and the way regulatory agencies look at approval. The science, of course, is changing. So it's not a good solution for AI to solve on its own.
Yeah. I mean, in a way, it's kind of a shame in one way, and that's that I've kind of highlighted this recently. I know in my newsletter, I've also talked about it on recent podcasts as well, is that we're sort of seeing kind of an overall market shift from a venture capital standpoint, much more towards, COVID related things, COVID diagnostics, COVID treatments, and things like that. And those dollars that were used for, cancer research and other things now are a bit harder to find, is at least what I'm hearing from people that I'm talking to. And if you happen to have an antimicrobial resistant drug, or you happen to have a drug that deals with epilepsy, I know are two good examples that I've had, personally, come across my desk, is, finding funding for those is pretty darn tough right now. And so the leaders of those companies I know are really struggling. And if, let's just say, a solution like Diviner could say, hey, look, this thing has a better chance of making it over the finish line versus some other drug that, would be, better for cancer treatment or whatever, that has a lesser chance of making it, then why not, sort of, shift your investment, maybe, might be the way to look at it, either from private equity or venture capital.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. I mean, that many people talk about the valley of death in drug development. So there's some promising early science, and there's just not enough funding from that stage where there's something promising to where it's, it shows enough evidence to get an IND, to get into clinical trials. And what we really want is for the funding, the flow to the most promising early science. And if you could better identify what that is, when we look at early science, as opposed to where Diviner is focused now, there'll be a lot of AI-based and analytics-based filtering first, because there's so many things to look at. But then, the collective intelligence of human experts can then add to that. But yeah, we know that if we can get adoption of these techniques, and we're starting with demonstrating the proof points, that we can make it easier for investors to pick the winners, and that will also attract more capital to the industry. There's a lot of capital globally that would love to be, there are pension funds all over the world. There's capital that could flow to drug development, but right now you have to be an expert in it to be able to make the investment choices. Only the big pharma companies and the big biotech VCs, by and large, that's the bulk of the investment. Regular investors, how would they do it? They don't know what to choose. So if we can give them a FICO score, if you will, or
Sure.
a movie score on a drug, this one is promising. So that that we believe that will attract more capital to more of that early science, that where there's a valley of death, as they say.
Absolutely. So Mark, there are 3 questions that I like to ask every guest. What inspires you?
What inspires me? People who have something they're passionate about and have the guts and the perseverance to stick with it. And there's a lot of people like that out there. There are obvious, well-known examples like Elon Musk. Electric cars, really? People are going to, yeah. Or Steve Jobs, right? Or there's many people like that. They're not all just the most famous ones. My wife, for choosing a new career that she was passionate about, when people said, "Why would you do that?" And so I was too timid for a number of years. So I'm inspired by people like that. And I think I've taken a step with what I'm doing now. That's a lot of people say, why would you, that's not going to work. So that inspires me, sort of people that have conviction and persistence. And yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Yeah. I mean, I completely agree with you. I find a lot of sort of entrepreneurial energy in the idea that, lots of people have tough ideas that they're trying to sort of promote in the world. And, just watching them come over the finish line is a great thing. I mean, and whether it is electric cars or getting back to space or, other things. I mean, Elon Musk has definitely done his fair share of things there, and he's had some failures. I mean, he has had some, clear and public failures as well. And with that, I mean, he just kind of moves on. I mean, what's the next thing? How do I do that? I mean, having I don't know how many rockets blow up on the re-landing pad whenever they were trying to recapture, their spacecraft was, I mean, as public probably as it gets. And probably a lot of people were saying, "You're just crazy, man. Why just send that thing up and let it be part of the space junk?"
So. Absolutely. And I feel so lucky to have encountered something that I can go for, something big that, if it works, will improve human health. I mean, that's
right.
That'd be amazing, right? So, but I've got to make a run at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And what concerns you?
Oh gosh, well, as an entrepreneur, a lot, with kids, a lot with a family, but. One of the things that really bothers me, I mean, a lot of people are concerned about things like climate change. I'm an optimist. Maybe I'm crazy, but I think technology will help us find solutions there. What I'm really worried about is the state of, and this is an American focused view. I think it's pretty bad in other parts of the world too. This tribalism and the people just not agreeing on the same set of facts, whether it's right or left. It happens on both ends of the political spectrum. Sure. People don't believe, they believe that, social media, the algorithms, I don't think they were intended to do what they've done to us, but people get entrenched and they get reinforced by what they get interested in. And I'm concerned that, democracy is at stake if people can't agree on basic facts. I mean, I would have said, I've thought over my whole life, that kind of thing would never happen here in the United States or in a Western uh, open democracy. You can't have that kind of corruption or something that'll take us totally off the rails because the media would expose it and there's so much transparency. Well, we don't have that now. We have all the transparency in the world with the internet,
Right.
and we don't have any agreement. So that's what I worry about that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you on the U.S. portion, but I mean, the shocker for me, I mean, if you watch what's happening right now with Canada and vaccines and the fact that they're shutting down the border because people that are crossing back and forth between the border have to be vaccinated, and the transport companies essentially are boycotting more or less. It's a real shocker for me to just see that this problem of wanting a better world or wanting a place where people are in general protected from, COVID, has become such a political football that people are willing to do whatever they have to do. And if it's shut down, borders, then it's shut down borders. They were saying though that, they were talking about actual, bigger reactions, I guess, if people were going to prevent people from getting to the hospital in Canada, which, thankfully, that's because one of the things I guess that they had talked about was, shutting down the transport routes to and from hospitals, which, to me, if you need care and you need you're having a heart attack or, you're in an ambulance for some reason, heaven forbid that there's, a blockade that prevents you from getting there. So I agree with you. I mean, this sort of ability to have a disagreement without that disagreement, potentially causing somebody else's life, seems to be where we've got to get back to somehow. And I don't have the answers there. I leave that up to bigger minds than mine. And what excites you, Mark?
What excites me? Big transformative ideas. So, the concept of Uber, right? Or Airbnb, those kinds of things. When there's a transformative way of doing something differently that makes so much sense once you see the picture, and especially if it's hard to get your head around, and a lot of people find it challenging to get their head around initially. I get excited about that kind of thing. I think that's why I like collective intelligence. Seeing something that can be transformative, that really at the heart of it is very simple, but it's a big idea. I love those kinds of things. So, I'll take an example that hasn't come about yet, like Airbnb and Uber has, or is still coming about, like Diviner is a big idea. There's got to be a better way for healthcare to see doctors instead of waiting 3 weeks to get an appointment to get one opinion and then not knowing if it's the right opinion. Why can't I see a panel of people at once on video and have discussion, and they draw on evidence-based medicine to see what my diagnosis is? Of course, there's a lot to be done on the evidence-based medicine side, but there are different ways to do things, and it's those big new concepts those excite me. They get me out of bed.
Yeah, it definitely seems like there's a lot more that could be done with telehealth. And I mean, along that same line, I visit my doctor, I fill out all my paperwork online before I ever go, and, go to see her face to face. And yet whenever I arrive, they want me to fill out a paper form. And I sort of balk at that each time. It's like, look, I mean, we're in the digital age. I mean, why are these things not digital? And I can't answer it for the doctor's office. I'm sure there's some reason why they can't convert this one last thing to the digital world. But it's, these sort of challenges are the things I look forward to most. I mean, I love, kind of where, AI is today. I love where, the personalized medicine journey is today. We're making progress. We're not done, but we are making progress. It is exciting.
Yeah, there is a lot of progress. I mean, I've got some doctors I've gone to see in the last year or so where all the conversation is happening in a little chat session that doesn't require me to log in and turn my keys upside down and type in 47 codes. Like I can just start having a conversation instead of a phone call and waiting and a fax. And so it's and, like health records, those things digitized in a standard way will make such a difference to the ability to understand, and with huge data sets where AI can be really great because there's millions and millions of records to learn from, what combinations of diagnoses and interventions lead to the best outcomes. And that's coming. I mean, it's taken forever just to get the data integration and standardization so you could even do those things, but we're getting there, and that's exciting. We're going to see big improvements to healthcare, I think, and to drug discovery and drug development when scientists and those considering which drugs to try can rely on that long-term outcome data to better assess what might work, but then also, in delivering healthcare. It's going to be an amazing next 10 or 20 years, I think.
So Mark, Gordon, I look forward to continuing to watch your journey with Diviner and all the things that you guys are doing there. Thanks so much for being a guest today on the podcast, and thanks for spending some time with me.
Thanks, Don. I really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
Thanks a lot. Thank you for listening to Life Science Success. For complete details about this podcast, including show notes, how to get in touch with guests, and more episodes, please visit www.lifesciencesuccess.com. If there's someone you'd like for us to invite to the show as a guest, please let me know by sending me a message at the podcast website. Please click subscribe on your favorite podcast app, share the podcast, or tell a friend about it, and last but not least, rate the podcast. Thank you again.